Welcome boys and girls, Costine here with a discussion about the top 5 races in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires that are most likely to be receiving DLC in the future from Creative Assembly, once the Slaanesh, Norska, and very likely High Elves are released. Now, this video is based on leaks, this video is based on official statements from Creative Assembly, and also based on just what makes sense. Like, you do expect certain characters to be added in Warhammer 3. Now, one of those characters, Nagash specifically, we have no idea which race he's going to be part of or he's going to be standalone. No clue on that. Will they add Glotkin as a leak suggested, the Chinese leak suggested? We don't know. But this video is not based on races that I think deserve a rework, because take for instance the Lizardmen. There is no indication whatsoever that Creative Assembly is looking to do a DLC for the Lizardmen in Warhammer 3. I do believe they need a rework. I think it would make sense. It would be a great opportunity to improve the jungle situation in the game, but there's absolutely no indication that they're planning to do so. Just worth pointing that out. So, at number 5, and this is certainly on the more speculative side of things, but at number 5 you have the Tomb Kings. You can wonder about Bretonnia, but I think with Bretonnia, I do expect them to add content for Bretonnia. I don't necessarily expect it to be paid content, because Creative Assembly have stated, and leaks have also stated, that Creative Assembly doesn't want to do paid content for Bretonnia. They want to add content for Bretonnia, but not necessarily paid content. Could be subject to change, but just worth pointing out, Bretonnia, I expect content, but I don't necessarily expect it to be paid content. So in terms of paid DLC, I think it's more likely that we're going to get Tomb Kings, though that's a bit of a question mark. The reason I would expect Tomb Kings simply has to do with Nagash. So if they add Nagash in the game, which I think is extremely likely, and multiple leaks from various sources have pointed out, if they add Nagash, it would just make a lot of sense for CA to add a Tomb King character, to do a Tomb Kings as part of that DLC. So whenever we get Nagash, that's probably the last chance we get Tomb Kings. Will it happen for certain? I guess it depends on how they do Nagash and whether or not they want to do Tomb Kings at the same time. Like, the Chinese leak suggested that they're going to do 5 factions as part of End Times DLC, which is probably just going to be an expansion pack, really, in open name, maybe even in name, but it is worth pointing out. Tomb Kings certainly need it from a lot of perspectives, like army capacity, research tree, just campaign dynamics in general. Tomb Kings could really use a rework. They could also use DLC to just kind of finish them as a race. And the primary reason they would be in there is simply because of Nagash, due to Nagash's history. I mean, we gotta have the showdown between Nagash, etc. It is a very iconic showdown in Warhammer lore. And just, having Tomb Kings with a new character, with a rework, with improvements for Cetra and Katep, especially, maybe Khalida, or maybe all characters, including Archon, would just be very fitting at the same time as Nagash would be added in. So we're probably going to be waiting for this for a while. I would actually expect it to be the last DLC release for Warhammer 3. But I think it makes a lot of sense. If they're going to do Nagash, they're going to do Tomb Kings, and I think it's very likely they're going to do Nagash. At number 4, we have the Empire. Now, there's various reasons for it. From a purely financial perspective, doing the Empire just makes perfect sense for Creative Assembly. Simply because the Empire is the most popular race, the most popular faction in Total War Fantasy, by far. And that's one of the reasons why Thrones of Decay did so well. The Empire and Dwarves, of course, being very, very popular. And also, Creative Assembly have mentioned that they want to make Boris Todbringer playable. There's also been discussions, at least in the Chinese leak, about the Son of Sigmar, or really, Vultan. Also, the Total War Center leak mentioned the End Times. And if you're going to have the End Times, then it just makes perfect sense to have Vultan as well. So there's opportunities. So Middenland, Middenheim, DLC, making both Vultan and Boris playable at the same time. How exactly they do that, I have no idea. I'm guessing there will be some map changes with regards to that. Maybe splitting off Middenland into 2 different provinces. Hopefully with 3 settlements each, because, 2 settlements per province is not great. Or I have no idea how they would tackle that specific subject. Regardless of how they decide to do it, they could just possibly put Vulcan and Talabium if they wanted to. But regardless of how they decide to tackle that specific subject, I think the Empire just makes sense for a whole list of reasons. It's been mentioned in leaks. They've mentioned it themselves with Boris in the past. Their plans since then have changed dramatically, I imagine. But I do certainly expect to a degree or another that we're gonna get something for the Empire. It might not be paid content, might just be purely free content, but out of the races of Warhammer 3, if there is one that I would expect content for, regardless of how they're going to do it, maybe paid, maybe not paid, it is going to be the Empire one way or another. You might say, well, the Empire just got the DLC with Thrones of Decay. Sure, but again, very popular race, and would just work from multiple perspectives for a DLC to basically finish them as a race, as a faction, to give them better melee options, maybe dismounted knights, for instance, because right now the infantry roster of the Empire is their Achilles heel, as it were. So a different playstyle, improve the research tree, because yes, it should be improved, but really just adding Vulcan and Boris as playable characters, as playable Legendary Lords, would make a huge amount of sense for Creative Assembly at this point. Especially if they're going to do an expansion with more races, more characters than regular DLCs. At number 3, we have the Vampire Counts. Now, this in itself is related to Nagash, so it will depend on whether or not they do Nagash and how they do Nagash, but there is more than that, because there is one specific character that is going to very likely be added and has been mentioned in leaks and just makes a huge amount of sense, and that is Neferata. We have Khalida in the game, we better have Neferata. She is one of the more important characters for the Vampire Counts. And yes, for the Vampire Counts, not Tomb Kings. And also, the reason I expect Neferata is because of what's already in the game. Like, Nagash was hinted at in Draziv's quest battle because of the combined Tomb Kings Vampire Counts army he deals with in that quest battle. With Neferata, you literally have the Silver Pinnacle in the game. And a bit of an interesting point about the Silver Pinnacle in Warhammer 3. You look at the Blasted Wastes as a province. You have a province with 4 regions over here, one held by the Vampire Counts and Silver Pinnacle itself, the other 3 held by the Greenskins. Ever since the Chaos Wars have been added in the game and they've changed the way the Darklands are, this specific province has screamed as being a starting province for a Legendary Lord. We just don't have the Lord. And so I do expect Neferata to be added in the game, partly because of Nagash, partly because of leaks, and really importantly because her starting province is literally in the game, and it would work very, very well in a lot of different ways. So, you know, you do have this situation here. There's always changes they could make to the terrain, and I think that's something Creative Assembly should not be afraid of. But yes, I do expect the Vampire Counts DLC, maybe some unique mechanics for Vlad, Isabella, Manfred, outside of the Books of Nagash, which is not a great system. And I would expect Vampire Counts at the same time as Tomb Kings. That way they could change the entire Books of Nagash system, so poor Volkmar is probably gonna have to wait until that happens to have a better campaign. All the same, I do think it's likely, extremely likely, very high likelihood. Like, if on a scale of 1 to 10, I would probably say Tomb Kings are maybe a 7. Or, no, maybe, let's just say a 5. Or 4. Empire is like a 6 or 7. Vampire Counts were already going into 8 or 9 territory. Not quite a 10. There's always a chance that they don't make the cut. But I do think that Neferata is very likely to happen. They could go down the very cheap-ass route and just make her a legendary hero. I think that would be bad, really. I don't think characters are interesting when you make them legendary heroes. I think legendary heroes should be less important characters, but ones that you still want to add in the game. I think legendary lords should be important characters that should be playable. Because, like, no one ever thinks about, like, oh, we're playing the Legendary Heroes campaign, right? We're playing the Bloodwrath campaign. No, we're playing Scarbrand, Arbol, or Skulltaker. And I think that's something we should not get Neferata as a legendary hero. I do expect Neferata, however. How exactly they add Neferata in the game, we'll have to find out on that subject, but I do think she's certainly going to be added into the game. And with that, a Vampire Counts DLC, rework, unique mechanics for existing legendary lords, all that kind of stuff. At number 2, we have the Skaven and Thanquol. Thanquol is as close to a racial leader that the Skaven have, at least in the end times. He has also made the transition to Age of Sigmar. So I would firmly expect Thanquol being added to Warhammer 3 before the game is done. I think he would come out at the same time, most likely at the same time as Nagash. That's what leaks have indicated. Various leaks, not just one or even two, multiple leaks have indicated that he is going to be coming out. Some leaks have mentioned that he's going to be coming out alongside Nagash. Others not necessarily so much. But when you look at Warhammer lore, when you look at Skaven lore, Thanquol is one of the most significant characters in Skaven lore, or at least in terms of how important he is in the books we do have, like Gotrek and Felix specifically. If you have Gotrek and Felix, and we do have Gotrek and Felix, we effectively have their adventures from Malachi's campaign. And Thanquol just makes perfect sense to just finish creating the proper Gotrek and Felix experience. Maybe we can ruin his day if we're playing Malachi. I have no idea how they would do him, or they'd add him. But yeah, makes sense. Would finish the Skaven roster with their demons, so to speak. Remember, Skaven are Chaos. Chaos Rats, specifically. It's kind of weird Kislev doesn't gain supporters by fighting Skaven, but yeah, just an oversight that Creative Assembly never corrected, which they should. All the same. Thanquol makes sense. I think he's very likely to come out probably towards the very end of the game. Depends on how they decide to do it. But regardless of when he comes out, he's almost certainly going to come out. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd certainly put this in an 11, maybe, but 10. So why is it not number 1? Because all of these things that I've talked about have an element of like, well, they could decide not to do it, right? There is one race in particular where it is pretty much certain that they're going to do it, one way or another. Because at number 1, we have Grand Cathay. And Grand Cathay is as certain as anything can be in terms of video game development or Warhammer 3 development. There are several reasons for this. Creative Assembly themselves have stated that they're looking to do content for Grand Cathay. There's been various leaks, and what I've been told, not by Creative Assembly, but by various people that have paid attention to this, that apparently Creative Assembly has a contract with Games Workshop to release a certain amount of content for Grand Cathay. And the Monkey King has literally been mentioned in loading screens. So I expect the Monkey King, I expect the Fire Dragon, his quote-unquote rival in Cathayan lore, and we might even get Ian Yin. Maybe, maybe not. Hard to say on that subject. But I certainly expect the Fire Dragon, I certainly expect the Monkey King. Whether or not they end up adding more than that, that's really the discussion. With Cathay, it's not so much the question on whether or not they will have a DLC, but whether or not they will be doing 2 DLCs for Cathay. So one with Monkey King, Fire Dragon, a 4th character too, and then another DLC with Yin Yin. They could do it like a Cathay, Dark Elves, Vampire Coast DLC, for instance, if they were looking to do that. And by the way, this brings me to the point. Why did I not add Dark Elves? Why did I not add Vampire Coast and all that? Well, because while I think Dark Elves would make sense, while I think Vampire Coast absolutely could use the DLC, there's no hard evidence of any kind, no leak, no suggested information that indicates they would be doing Coast, for instance, or anything really on the subject of Dark Elves. We haven't gotten that information. Whereas we have information that they are going to do at least one more DLC for Grand Cathay. Makes financial sense because of the Chinese market. Makes sense assuming they have that contract and it's still valid with Games Workshop for Cathay content. Many other things at the same time. I think Cathay could certainly use further updates, like a replenishment hero, for instance, or changing Alchemist to have replenishment and then adding a different hero for campaign movement range, because it's just kind of weird to have Alchemists with campaign movement range as opposed to casualty replenishment. Just a point on that subject. We'll see. We will see what Creative Assembly does, but these are the 5 races that I think are most likely to receive DLC, specifically paid DLC, from CA going forward. Let me know what you guys think on this. Again, this is not about the races I think should receive DLC or reworks or updates. Rather, this is about the races that I think will receive DLC, updates, and so on. Stay tuned for more.